Okay, great. All right, so today we are going to try and make a release of pylhe, given we're going to make a patch release. And so, all right, so since we already recently accepted a bug fix PR, and in that PR, we also went ahead, we can just go ahead and check. We can look at the published distribution CI that ran really recently. And if we go and look in there and actually look at the artifacts, we can look at both the contents of the sdist, that all looks fine. And then similarly, the wheel also looks fine. So that's all good to go. That looks like the stuff that we want to try and publish. So the very first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to make sure we don't get pings. Also quit Slack while this is happening. So the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and bump the release version. The way we're going to do that first is we're going to go to our GitHub Actions tab. We're going to go to the bump version action. And here we can see that we can trigger this manually because we've enabled workflow dispatch. So we're going to go over to the workflow. And here we have basically some questions on if we want to do major minor patch, if this is a release candidate, what we have to manually enter the version we want to bump to. If we want to, we can override all the checks, and the default is to perform a dry run. Okay, so if we go back to the homepage to begin with, the last release we did was version 0.5.0, and we have a little bug fix. We want to make a small patch release. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go run workflow. We're going to keep it at patch. It's not a release candidate. We're just going to go ahead and do this. The new version we want to bump to is 0.5.1. We're going to keep the checks, and we're going to do a dry run first just to make sure that this all should work. So we're going to go ahead and run that. And in a few seconds, this should pop up and show us that we have workflow running. It does. So we'll go ahead and look to see how that, we'll go ahead and just watch this as it runs. It's pretty fast. Okay, that all looks good. And then we can even also go in there just to make sure that if we look at the updated tag annotation information, we can see that this is the old tag and this is the new tag, so that all looks good. And we see that we have both the doc change as well as the fix. Okay, so we're now going to go back into our Actions tab, select bump version again. We're now going to run the workflow, entering in again 0.5.1. But this time we're going to run it for real. So instead of, so we're going to select false for dry run because we actually want to run it this time. And now we're going to run. Okay. Great. So now this is running again. And this time this is actually going to go ahead and push back a change to GitHub. And okay, so it's done so. And now if we go and look at the pylhe page, we see that we have this bump version that just was run. So that's fine. So if we can go ahead and also pull that, and we see we get the tag locally. Okay, that's all well and good. So at the moment now, our CI is running for this. So the next thing we care about now that we have bump the tag is we want to actually publish some distributions. So if we go to look at our published distributions, workflows, we see that we have one that's running right now on main. And so we'll go ahead and let go ahead and build this wheel and check everything real quick. Okay, and so this is just a check, and so everything built fine, but again, we can look and we see that we actually have a 0.5.1 Estes and wheel. So now what we want to do, that we know this all worked just fine in CI, is we're going to want to go ahead and publish a distribution to test pylhe. So the way that we do this is, again, under the GitHub Actions, we're going to go to the we're going to select the publish distributions workflow. And from here, again, we can run this manually using workflow dispatch. We're going to go to run workflow, and then we're going to keep it the branch we want to run the workflow on from main. And there's this toggle here of publish to test pylhe, and we're going to select true. And we're now going to run this workflow. Okay, so now we just manually enabled that, and this is queued, and it should be running soon. This will take just a little bit. Okay, so this is now uploading to test pylhe. Stest is up, wheel is up, and we also have a URL for test pylhe there. So we can now visit this, and this is looking pretty good. We see that the README looks reasonable. We see our new contributor is there. And if we go ahead and look at the files, we see that we have both the sdist as well as the wheel. So that looks good. So the next stage, now that test pylhe looks like everything is fine, is we're going to actually make a GitHub release, which will itself trigger the deployment to pylhe. Okay, so the way we're going to do this is we're going to go over to the releases tab, or the releases, I guess, icon or sidebar on the GitHub page. And from this, we're now going to select draft a new release. We already have a tag because we pushed a tag when we did the bump version. So we're going to select v0.5.1, and we're just going to do v0.5.1 as the release name. And we're going to also ask it to generate release notes for us automatically, which will go ahead and bring up the two changes as well as mention our new contributor. So if we go ahead and look at this, this is not a pre-release, so we're going to leave it blank. This is the latest, and I don't remember. Do we create discussions? Let me go check. Do we have one for? Okay, we do have one, so I'll go ahead and create a discussion for this release as well. And yeah, we'll leave that as an announcement. So now we're going to publish the release. And by publishing this, we now have gone ahead and kicked off yet another workflow. So if we go back to actions, we now see that we have one more publish distributions workflow that is running. And this one is actually going to publish to pylhe itself. So we can go ahead and once again wait for the minute or so that this takes to run. All right, so SDIS is up, wheel is up. Oops. Okay, so this is something we'll need to fix. We can rerun this workflow to fix this, but the reason why this failed is because on pylhe, we currently have it such that a two-factor authentication is required. So I'm gonna, in another screen, log into pylhe and change this temporarily. So this is something that we should fix. Okay, so yeah. So at the moment, you can see that for pylhe, we have two-factor authentication required. However, what that means is that all the maintainers need to have that required, and at the moment, that's not the case. So I'm going to temporarily manage the security settings for this. So then I'm going to disable two-factor authentication requirements for pylhe just for right now until we can fix this globally. Okay, so this is now disabled. I'm now going to simply just rerun this job, rerun failed jobs. And now that that has been fixed, then this should run as we expect. Okay, now the SDIS is up, or now the wheel and SDIS are up, and we have a URL. Oops. Yeah, so we now have a URL, and if we visit this, then we now see that pylhe version 0.5.1 is up and released. Okay, cool. So that is the release process, and at some point in the near future, I should get that written up.